At this point, we need to tell Angular to load a root component through a process that's called bootstrapping. This then requires us to also set up the index.html file to host our application. If you're not familiar with the term, bootstrapping is a self-starting process that loads up an app and starts it off. Most Angular applications have an index.html file that contains the main page for the application. This index.html file is often the one, only, true web page of the application. This kind of web application is often called a single-page application, or SPA. It looks to the user like there are lots of pages, but what's really happening is quite different. Instead, pieces of HTML are being inserted into the single HTML page, called index.html, and the page never actually reloads or is replaced by another page. Let's look at how all this works. Here again is our app component. Remember, the selector is the name of the component when we use it as a directive, or also known as a custom element, in HTML. And the template defines the HTML we want to display on the page. So in the index.html code, we simply add the selector where we want our template displayed. In the template, we call this a directive. When the root element is loading, the loading app message appears. As soon as the loading is complete, the HTML defined in the component template is inserted between the selector element tags and appears on the page. We now have the index.html file set up to host the application by specifying the selector from the root component as a directive in the HTML body. You may be wondering how the module loader is going to find the root component. Recall from the last section when we configured system.js, our module loader, and index.html. We instructed it to bootstrap the app by importing a module called main. Main is our bootstrapper module, and it looks like this. The main.ts file bootstraps our first component by providing a starting point to kick off our application. Looking at this file from the bottom section first, we call a bootstrap function. This function loads our first module, which is our app component. We had to define where the module loader can find our app component, so we added an import statement to import a component from our module. Since we are using Angular's bootstrap function, we also add an import statement to import it. We import the bootstrap function from Angular 2/platform/browser. It is not a part of Angular 2/core because the bootstrap features are different depending on the platform. We plan to run the application in a browser, so we import it from Angular 2/platform/browser. This code provides the starting point for our application. Once we bootstrap our root application component, we can leave this main.ts file alone and not have to worry about it again. Now let's add this to our course project application and see the bootstrapping process in action. In this code along, we'll set up index.html to host our application and bootstrap the app component to get our application up and running. Here we are back in our course project, exactly how we left it. To host our application, we modify the index.html file in the body tag, and we'll replace the plain text with the component selector as a directive. Think of a directive as simply a custom HTML tag. If we want to display a message on the page while the application is loading, we can add it here. In our system.js configuration, we can see that the module loader imports our main module. The main.ts file was included with the starter kit. It contains the bootstrapping code we saw in the last lecture. At this point, we're ready to try out our application. We saw in the last section how to start the application by using the gulp command or the npm start command at the terminal command line. We'll first see the original loading app message, and when the root component is loaded, that message is replaced with the HTML from our component. Then the binding in that HTML is replaced with the value of our page title property. We now have a very simple but functioning application. When using Cloud9 with a web server up and running, the application can be accessed via a public URL. The URL is composed of three parts. The third part is .c9users.io. The second part is a hyphen and your username for your C9 account. In my case, it's -aloha code. And the first part at the beginning of the URL is the name of the application that is running. In our case, it's local events app. So the full URL is local events app -aloha code, or whatever your username is, .c9users.io. With the app displayed in the browser, let's take a look at the browser developer tools. With the browser window active, press F12. The exact tools you see here may depend on the browser you are using. I'm using Chrome. Most modern browsers provide a console tab as part of the development tools. This is always the first place to look if the page does not appear as expected or doesn't appear at all. Errors, warnings, and other information is displayed here. Use the Elements tab or DOM Explorer to view the HTML displayed in the page. This is a depiction of the DOM, or Document Object Model. The Document Object Model is the document model loaded in the browser and represents our HTML as a node tree where each node is part of our HTML. Here is the HTML from the index.html file, and here is our selector tag. Open the selector tag and we see the HTML that we defined in our components template. This view is a great way to see the HTML for the rendered page. There is also a debugger option available here on the Sources tab to view and debug the code.